Hello again. We're back, Anna and I, with lunch and literature. Yeah. The menu today is toast and hard-boiled eggs and avocado and herring. Yeah, I don't think it will be before after picture today because this isn't really that graphic. My hopes and dreams is that it will not be that messy. There might be some pieces of egg around, but I think the effect here is more the fragrance that we might get from the herring. But for now, it seems quite civilized, so let's hope it stays that way. Yeah, you're not so sure about that? Okay, I can still have my dreams. For the literature part, we are continuing with The Hobbit. And we were right after dinner in the Hobbit hole. Yeah, right after dinner. With the dwarves and Gandalf as visitors. And Fili and Kili and Balin and Dwalin had just helped the Hobbit, Bilbo, do the dishes. And then we are back in the living room where the rest of the party is enjoying an after dinner session. Gandalf sat at the head of the party with the 13 dwarves all around, and Bilbo sat on a stool at the fireside, nibbling at a biscuit. His appetite was quite taken away, and trying to look as if this was all perfectly ordinary and not in the least an adventure. The dwarves ate and talked, and time got on. At last they pushed their chairs back, and Bilbo made a move to collect the plates and glasses. "I suppose you will all stay to supper," he said, in his politest, unpressing tones. "Of course," said Thorin, "and after, we shan't get through the business till late, and we must have some music first. Now to clear up." Thereupon the 12 dwarves, not Thorin, he was too important, and stayed talking to Gandalf, jumped to their feet and made tall piles of all the things. Off they went, not waiting for trays, balancing columns of plates, each with a bottle on the top, with one hand, while the Hobbit ran after them, almost squeaking with fright. "Please be careful, and please don't trouble. I can manage." But the dwarves only started to sing. "Chip the glasses and crack the plates, blunt the knives and bend the forks. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. Smash the bottles and burn the corks. Cut the cloth and thread on the fat. Pour the milk on the pantry floor. Leave the bones on the bedroom mat. Splash the wine on every door." Yeah, this sounds like you, Nanner. "Dump the crocks in the boiling bowl. Pour them up with a thumping pole. And when you've finished, if any are whole, send them down the hall to roll. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates, so carefully with the plates." And of course, they did none of these dreadful things, and everything was cleaned and put away safe as quick as lightning, while the Hobbit was turning around and around in the middle of the kitchen trying to see what they were doing. When they went back and found Thorin with his feet on the fender smoking a pipe. They went back and found Thorin with his feet on the fender smoking a pipe. He was blowing the most enormous smoke rings, and wherever he told one to go, it went. Up the chimney, or behind the clock on the mantelpiece, or under the table, or round and round the ceiling. But wherever it went, it was not quick enough to escape Gandalf. Pop! He sent a smaller smoke ring from his short clay pipe straight through each one of Thorin's. Then Gandalf's smoke ring would go green and come back to hover over the wizard's head. He had a cloud of them about him already. and in the dim light it made him look strange and sorcerous. Bilbo stood still and watched. He loved smoke rings. And then he blushed to think how proud he had been yesterday morning of the smoke rings he had sent up the wind over the hill. "Now for some music," said Thorin. "Bring out the instruments." Kili and Fili rushed for their bags and brought back little fiddles. Dori, Nori, and Ori brought out flutes from somewhere inside their coats. Bombur produced a drum from the hall. Bifur and Bofur went out too and came back with the clarinets that they had left among the walking sticks. Dwalin and Balin said, "Excuse me, I left mine in the porch." "Just bring mine in with you," said Thorin. They came back with the viols as big as themselves, and with Thorin's harp wrapped in a green cloth. It was a beautiful golden harp, and when Thorin struck it, the music began all at once, so sudden and sweet that Bilbo forgot everything else and was swept away into dark lands under strange moons, far over the water and very far from the Hobbit hole under the hill. The dark came into the room from the little window that opened in the side of the hill. The firelight flickered. It was April, and still they played on while the shadow of Gandalf's beard wagged against the wall. The dark filled all the room, and the fire died down, and the shadows were lost, and still they played on. And suddenly, first one of them, then another, began to sing as they played, deep-throated singing of the dwarfs in the deep places of their ancient homes. And this is like a fragment of their song, if it can be like their song without their music. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day, to seek the pale, enchanted gold. The dwarves of yore made mighty spells, while hammers fell like ringing bells, in places deep where dark things sleep, in hollow halls beneath the fells. For ancient kings and elvish lords, there many a gleaming golden hoard, they shaped and wrought, and light they caught, to hide in gems on hilts of swords. On silver necklaces they sprung, the flowering stars on crowns they hung, the dragon fire in twisted wire, they meshed the light of moon and sun, far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deeps and caverns old. We must away ere break of day, to claim our long-forgotten gold. Goblets they carved there for themselves, and harps of gold where no man delves. There lay they long, and many a song was sung unheard by men or elves. The pines were roaring on the height, the winds were moaning in the night. The fire was red, it flaming spread, the trees like torches blazed with light. The bells were ringing in the dale, and men looked up with faces pale. The dragon's ire, more fierce than fire, laid low their towers and houses frail. The mountains smoked beneath the moon. The dwarfs, they heard the tramp of doom. They fled their halls in dying fall, beneath his feet, beneath the moon, far over the misty mountains grim, to dungeons deep and caverns dim. We must away ere break of day, to win our harps of gold from him. Yeah, ominous. Ominous poem, or it was a song. In the book, they sang it. Yeah. There are some really cool versions of this song, by the way. On YouTube, if you look up Misty Mountains, Misty Mountains is probably enough. Search for that, you can find some really cool editions of people singing it a cappella and with instruments and everything. As they sang, the hobbit felt the love of beautiful things made by hands and by cunning and by magic moving through him. A fierce and jealous love, the desire of the hearts of dwarves. Then something tookish woke up inside him, and he wished to go and see the great mountains, and hear the pine trees and the waterfalls, and explore the caves, and wear a sword instead of a walking stick. He looked out of the window. The stars were out in the dark sky above the trees. He thought of the jewels of the dwarfs shining in dark caverns. Suddenly, in the wood beyond the water, a flame leapt up, probably somebody lighting a wood fire, and he thought of plundering dragons settling on his quiet hill and kindling it all to flames. He shuddered, and very quickly he was plain Mr. Baggins of Bag End, Underhill again. He got up trembling. He had less than half a mind to fetch the lamp, and more than half a mind to pretend to and go and hide behind the beer barrels in the cellar, and not come out again until all the dwarfs had gone away. You've thrown all your food on the floor again. Again, not as spectacularly as yesterday, because it's not that spectacular kind of food, but it's all on the floor. Floor, yeah. Is that where food belongs? No. The answer is no. I don't understand why you don't eat it. It's good food. Yeah, food, you say, pointing on the floor. Okay, but will you sit and just listen? You shake your head, but let's try. Not come back until the dwarves had gone away. Suddenly, he found that the music and the singing had... You're very noisy. The music and the singing had stopped, and they were all looking at him with eyes shining in the dark. "Where are you going?" said Thorin, in a tone that seemed to show that he guessed both halves of the hobbit's mind. What about a little light?" said Bilbo, apologetically. "We like the dark," said all the dwarves. "Dark for dark business. There are many hours before dawn." "Of course," said Bilbo, and sat down in a hurry. He missed a stool and sat on the fender, knocking over the poker and shovel with a crash. "Hush," said Gandalf. "Let Thorin speak." And this is how Thorin began. "Gandalf, dwarves, and Mr. Baggins, we are met together in the house of our friend and fellow conspirator, this most excellent and audacious hobbit. May the hair on his toes never fall out. All praises to his wine and ale." He paused for breath and for a polite remark for the hobbit. But the compliments were quite lost on poor Bilbo Baggins, who was wagging his mouth in protest at being called audacious, and worst of all, fellow conspirator, though no noise came out. He was so flummoxed. So Thorin went on. "We are met to discuss our plans, our ways, means, policy, and devices. We shall soon before the break of dawn start on our long journey, a journey from which some of us, or perhaps all of us, except our friend and counselor, the ingenious wizard Gandalf, may never return. It is a solemn moment. Our object is, I take it, well known to us all. To the estimable Mr. Baggins, and perhaps to one or two of our younger dwarves, I think I shall be right in naming Killy and Feely, for instance. The exact situation at the moment may require a little brief explanation." This was Thorin's style. He was an important dwarf. If he had been allowed, he would probably have gone on like this until he was out of breath, without telling anyone there anything that was not already known. But he was rudely interrupted. Poor Bilbo couldn't wear it any longer. At "may never return," he began to feel a shriek coming up inside, and very soon it burst out like a whistle of an engine coming out of a tunnel. All the dwarfs sprang up, knocking over the table. Gandalf struck a blue light on the end of his magic staff, and in its firework glare, the poor little hobbit could be seen kneeling on the hearthrug, shaking like a jelly that was melting. Then he fell flat on the floor and kept on calling out, struck by lightning, over and over again. And that was all they could get out of him for a long time. So they took him and laid him out of the way on the drawing room sofa with a drink at his elbow, and they went back to their dark business. "Excitable little fellow," said Gandalf, as they sat down again. "Gets funny, queer fits, but he's one of the best, as fierce as a dragon in a pinch." If you have ever seen a dragon in a pinch, you will realize that this was only poetical exaggeration applied to any hobbit, even to old Took's great-granduncle Belroar, who was so huge for a hobbit that he could ride a horse. He charged the ranks of the goblins of Mount Graham in the Battle of the Green Fields, and knocking their king Gulfimbur's head clean off with a wooden club. It sailed 100 yards through the air and went down a rabbit hole. And in this way the battle was won, and the game of golf was invented at the same moment. In the meanwhile, however, Balrog's gentler descendant was reviving in the drawing room. After a while and a drink, he crept nervously to the door of the parlor. This is what he heard. Gloin speaking, "Humph," or some snort, more or less like that. "Will he do you think? It is all very well for Gandalf to talk about this hobbit being fierce, but one shriek like that in the moment of excitement would be enough to wake the dragon and all his relatives and kill the lot of us. I think it sounded more like fright than excitement. In fact, if it had not been for the sign on the door, I should have been sure we had come to the wrong house. As soon as I clapped eyes on the little fellow bobbing and puffing on the mat, I had my doubts. He looked more like a grocer than a burglar." Then Mr. Baggins turned the handle and went in. The Took side had won. He suddenly felt he would go without bed and breakfast to be thought fierce. As for little fellow bobbing on the mat, it almost made him really fierce. Many a time afterwards, the Baggins part regretted what it did now. And he said to himself, "Bilbo, you're a fool. You walked right in and put your foot in it." "Pardon me," he said. "If I have overheard words that you were saying, I don't pretend to be understanding what you're talking about or your references to burglars, but I think I am right in believing," this is what he called being on his dignity, "that you think I am no good. I will show you. I have no signs on my door. It was painted a week ago, and I am quite sure you have come to the wrong house. As soon as I saw your funny faces on the doormat, I had my doubts, but treat it as the right one. Tell me what you want done, and I will try it. If I have to walk from here to the east of East and fight the wild wereworms in the last desert. I had a great-great-grand-uncle once, Bullroarer Took, and—" Yes, but that was long ago," said Gloin. "I was talking about you, and I assure you that there is a mark on this door. The usual one in the trade, or used to be. Burglar wants a good job, plenty of excitement, and reasonable reward. That's how it usually reads. You can say expert treasure hunter instead of burglar if you like. Some of them do. It's all the same to us. Gandalf told us that there was a man of the sort in these parts looking for a job at once, and that he had arranged for a meeting here this Wednesday tea time." "Of course there's a mark," said Gandalf. "I put it there myself, for very good reasons. You asked me to find the 14th man of your expedition, and I chose Mr. Baggins. Just let anyone say I choose the wrong man or the wrong house, and you can stop at 13 and have all the bad luck you like, or go back to digging coal." He scowled so angrily at Gloin that the dwarf huddled back in his chair, and when Bilbo tried to open his mouth to ask a question, he turned and frowned at him and stuck out his bushy eyebrows till Bilbo shut his mouth tight with a snap. "That's right," said Gandalf. "Let's have no more argument. I have chosen Mr. Baggins, and that ought to be enough for all of you. If I say he's a burglar he is, or will be when the time comes. There's a lot more in him than you guess, and a deal more than he has any idea of himself. You may possibly all live to thank me yet. Now, Bilbo, oh boy, fetch the lamp, and let's have a little light on this." Yes. I think that's where we stop. Kind of a little cliffhanger there. What are they actually going to do? Because we didn't get to that. But we can guess that it has to do with caverns of gold and fierce dragons. And burgling those caverns. I guess it's a quite well-known story, so there might not be too much excitement for most of you listeners. But Anna, you don't know this story. So for you, it's exciting. All right, this will probably continue next week because tomorrow it's another Norwegian reading day, and then we continue on the early modern era, and I think we're at Cortez and the the invasion of the Aztec Empire. So that is that. We say bye-bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.